Hey friends, welcome back to The Big Flush. It is August 22nd. I'm Zach Marentet, and I'm here with my buddy John Enott. John, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, Zach. I'm doing great. It's a great day to be alive in the fine city of Windsor, Ontario, where we are broadcasting from today. It's a beautiful day. How are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. It's been a wonderful day and an even more rewarding week. Get ready to hold your nose, folks. A lot of shit has been going down in the United States of America. I mean, what's going on, John? I mean, we have Bill Maher's controversy with Representative Congresswoman from your state of Michigan, Rashida Tlaib, to do with the BDS boycott. There's a lot of nuance to that subject matter, as John, you brought to my attention last night before when we were planning our schedule for today about some legislation that was going on. We look forward to talking about that. We also have an update on the issue of white supremacy in light of the El Paso shooting. Tucker Carlson of Fox News is having some of his advertisers pulled because of his lack of condemnation of white supremacy, and there's, again, a lot of nuance to discuss with that. Remember, John, when we were off, you were in Miami working on your magazine, and I was in Europe working on the independent movie that I'm co-producing, World War II film. I think it was July 8th, they were having the Afro Future Fest in Detroit. And I knew about this for a while, but it never occurred to me to bring it up after we came back from our respective vacations. And yeah, they were charging non-people of color double the amount, and they had to change the policy in the end because, again, some of the black performers there who have many white people on their staff considered it to be racist. And that's another interesting subject, which I think we should, it deserves our attention here.
So by non-people of color, you mean white people?
Yeah, but that's the joke, because if you were, like, what if you're, you know, Pakistani, or you have nothing to do historically with the injustice towards African-American people? How does that make sense? And the reason I wanted to connect it to what we're talking about with regard to Tucker Carlson and white supremacy is, you know, we've mentioned it before. Why is it always only white supremacy? Can't any other race be racist as well?
That's the million-dollar question, which we both know the answer to.
We also have to talk a little bit about motivational speakers, a really cool YouTuber that you brought to my attention. I've known about her for a little while, but now I'm going to make a point to subscribe and follow her even more. It's Nicole Arbour.
Ah, yes, I love Nicole Arbour. She is, she's funny, she's witty, she's got a great background story of overcoming severe disability after an automobile accident. She was an up-and-rising star. You know, she was doing a lot of, she's from Canada.
Yeah.
She was doing a lot of broadcast stuff. She was doing comedy and had a whole big career in front of her, and then got in a horrible car accident which derailed everything and almost left her crippled. And not only did she come back from it, she's used the internet now to be funny, but also bring awareness and call out a lot of the hypocrisy in the media, in government, and people in general. And I love her approach to things.
Yes, I seem to as well, based on what I've watched so far. And she keeps everything short, sweet, and concise, which is what I really like in her, about her videos. And finally, we wanted to go over some of the anti-American sentiments this week and where we stand on that. Bill Maher, among other Democrats, saying things, and I love Bill Maher, but hoping for a recession as a way of eliminating, you know, the orange guy out of the White House.
Oh yeah, let's financially bankrupt everybody.
Yeah, yeah, and also on the Young Turks, which, you know, from time to time I like their videos, and from time to time I don't. You know, it depends on the context. But you know, recently, and I think Tucker Carlson actually gave them attention, because you never really hear you don't frequently hear about them in the mainstream television media. No. But I did yesterday when I was flipping through the channels and wanted to see what Tucker Carlson, who's also a little bit of a douche. I'm not going to say the guy's name from TYT, but I've watched some of his videos. Douchezilla par excellence.
Yes.
And I don't know if he knows this, but he and Jerry Falwell, the late Jerry Falwell, have a tremendous lot in common because they both, blame 9/11 on the United States, saying that they deserved it for different reasons, of course, but the same conclusion.
I mean, you're always responsible for your own demise, right?
Yeah. So let's start today, John, with the BDS boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Bill Maher was calling that bullshit. Excuse me. And Rashida Tlaib was sort of calling for his, and it's not the first time for Bill Maher. She was calling for his show to be canceled from HBO. The last time they did that was when he was talking to a congressman or representative from a state. I think it could have been Arkansas, Wyoming. I mean, it was a Midwest state where most of their work is agriculture. And he was a Republican, and Bill Maher obviously is going to poke fun at that. This is not previous. This is before. And the gentleman that he was interviewing said, "Well, you should come out, Bill Maher, to my state, and I can put a shovel in your hand, and you can help with grow some corn or something to that effect." And Bill Maher, the joke was that Bill Maher is a sort of elitist liberal who doesn't know what it's like to work with his hands and should
think.
Well, I'm not going to say.
I'll say
that I'm not accustomed to the plow myself, so I'm not one to judge.
Oh, well.
But Bill Maher's, the way he responded back then to that guy was, "Hey, I don't do field work. I'm the head house, you know what, the N-word."
Yeah, I remember when he said that. He got a little bit of hot water for that.
Oh, a little bit. They wanted his show off.
I know.
I think, Chance the Rapper said immediately that he should lose his show.
You know what, though? I mean, first of all, before we go any farther, I just want to say that that's fucking capital F bullshit. Okay, if you have a political show, even if you have just a regular television show, the fact that we're in the day and age where you can get butthurt over something that someone said and then demand that they can lose their show, lose their job, basically be flushed, for lack of a better word, out of society because you said so. Even if you hold strong views, whether it was a misstatement, whether you didn't think before you talked, or whether it was intentionally hateful, it doesn't matter. I mean, he's got a political show, which means he's going to say controversial things.
Right.
He's going to piss somebody off.
And his name's Bill Maher.
And his name's Bill Maher, okay? So I used to like Bill Maher before he got all kind of radical. He used to be right down the middle and would call bullshit when he saw it, and then something happened and he kind of went to the left side of things, which, okay, whatever. But, whether I like Bill Maher or not, it's a political show. So on any given night, he's going to say something that's going to offend somebody, and he might offend them severely. And what? He's supposed to have his show removed? So how do you possibly have a political show, especially a political debate show, if you have to be worried about what comes out of your mouth during the debate? So what that becomes is a biased, leaning propaganda show, not a debate show. So, and it's, as we go through this BDS issue, I mean, I actually, sad to say, agree with Rashida Tlaib on this issue. But I don't agree with her saying that Bill Maher should have his show removed. I mean, get the fuck out of here.
Well, last time it happened, it was, and I'm just saying the names that come to mind immediately. There were many others. I think even Howard Stern condemned him, so it wasn't only celebrities from the African-American community, to be sure. But so a week later, we had the reaction was very Orwellian, show trial, compelled confession sort of thing, because everybody who watches Bill Maher's show regularly knows that he's made statements in the past he doesn't really tend to date white women. He likes real women who are of color, whether that's Hispanic, African American. I think he even mentioned, well, you know, white women have nothing to grab onto, and he wants that.
So he's got jungle fever?
Yeah, something like that.
Bill Maher, really?
Yeah, oh,
I did
yeah.
not know that.
Yeah, well, he's a you know, lifelong bachelor, committed bachelor.
Yeah.
And
see, he's stealing from the Italians. See, he saw Al Pacino and Robert De Niro and who they date, so he's like,
Right.
yeah, I want to be bad like those Italian guys.
well, they're not bad. I mean, I agree that some
No,
people are
bad
just,
meaning good.
yeah, people have their preferences.
Yes,
I don't
they
judge.
do. I don't judge.
But then the next week he had on Ice Cube, who I really like. I think he's a great, not only rapper, but I love the barbershop movies.
Oh, yeah.
I just didn't really care for the way that he responded to this, especially when he produced records with the N-word in it that are so frequently purchased by white people. He gets rich off of them.
Well, I mean, you know, and that's the whole thing. And, you know, I hate to bring him up or use him because of, you know, how his life has gone, but something Bill Cosby used to rail about when he was lecturing, you know, the African-American community is
yeah, I know.
this is a terrible word. So the fact that it's been glorified into modern music now and it's used freely, and there's expressions that have been developed using the word over time that don't mean, you know, the actual context of the word.
Right.
You know, the way Bill Maher used it, especially when he's down with all those folks and he's sharing their ideology and they love him, you know, he probably felt like he was included enough where he could use the word.
Right.
And, you know, it's like everybody and their mother can use the word except somebody with white skin, which I don't know. I mean, the word is horrible. Nobody should use it.
Right.
African Americans shouldn't use it. It shouldn't be in music. I mean, the real connotation of it. And if you want to use an ugly word like that to bond over, you know, oppression or racism, I mean, there's got to be a better word, and it's horrible. So I think, again, you're picking and choosing. I mean, and you also have to look at the context things. He wasn't coming out and calling anybody a name. He wasn't disparaging anybody. He was using a colloquial, you know, phrase that's been used before in a different context. And I mean, the guy apologized for it, and
right.
In the heat of the moment in a live show, he just thought he was probably being hip and cool, you know? Of
course. And remember, this is so pitiful that it actually comes down to the last two letters and the way it was pronounced. Was it A-H, or did it have a hard R at the end? And he did not use the hard R.
The fact that people take time out of their damn lives to sit around and argue about that, was it E-R or A-R?
Right.
Freaking, that means you got enough time to have a second or third or fourth job, or you can volunteer at a charity, or you can do something meaningful.
Of course.
Get a life. Jeez.
But these are celebrities, and the other guest that was on was a person that we've talked on before. I don't like her, and I don't mean that personally. I don't know her personally, but as far as her celebrity presence, I think she was Bernie Sanders' former campaign manager, Simone Sanders. I don't really care for her ways. When I say her ways, the way she carries herself on television, and she was on CNN, if not still for a while. She's the one who said that we should make the #1 priority for being in Congress skin color, eliminating white people and just hiring people based on their race, which of course is not at all racist.
Well, no, why would that be racist? I mean, come on. You know, why should genocide of any nationality based on skin color or removal from society, why should that be racist?
Exactly.
People, I hate people. I hate people. Zach, I hate people.
Regardless of it doesn't matter. We're not, no racism, just people.
It's just people. It's, you know, and I beat a dead horse when I go through, you know, my week and I have different discussions with people, and it's, you know, they keep trying to, the media and some people keep trying to portray our country as that it's some, like, terrible place where everybody just hates everybody for things like skin color or ideology and whatnot. And it's really not like that. We're talking about a small percentage of people. Internet trolls, I like to call them. They could be your mom, they could be your aunt, they could be your grandfather, they could be your neighbor, your buddy from work, could be anybody, but there's a certain segment of society has morphed into this unreal internet realm of trolling, and because I guarantee you, the people that talk so freely about this stuff on YouTube or on social media or even in the media, if they were face to face with those same people in a room somewhere, I guarantee you 99.9% of them wouldn't open their yap.
Yeah, they'd keep their tongues behind their teeth.
They definitely would, because people are cowards.
Right.
The internet is like this force field shield that they hide behind. It's like a big life simulation game.
Right.
But put them out in the real world and let them see if they spew the same kind of stuff.
Right, but they don't have to. This is where it's all going down now.
Well,
and it's the cruelty of it sometimes.
There ought to be a law, just like with this BDSM thing.
Oh,
did I say BDSM?
Freudian slip there, John?
Oh, well, hey, you know, my stomach's tied in knots, metaphorically speaking.
Well, you want to know something? It's a movement, so it is the BD. It should be, if it was... they must have thought for a moment, are we going to call this BDSM or BDS? Because it is a movement, and there should be an M there at the
Well,
end.
how about just BM?
BM.
To go with the big flush, it's a big bowel movement to me.
Yeah, hold your nose.
Yeah, I did say BD. Did I say BDSM or
BDSM? That stands for...
I don't even know what it stands for. I just know it means people like to be tied up and whipped.
Well, I wondered what it meant when I was much younger, so I looked it up, and it's bondage, dominance, sadism, and masochism.
I got to tell you something funny. Like, there used to be classified ads with that kind of stuff, and I remember being in the personal ads, and I would see these ads for girls that would put an ad in that say BBW, and I used to think that meant big-boned women, but it stands for big, beautiful women. And I learned that over a very awkward, funny conversation one time with a group of friends of mine, all of which were girls. And I was like, yeah, you know, those big bone women. They're like, what the hell are you talking about? I go, well, those personal ads, BBW. No, it's big, beautiful women. I'm like, oh. So now that I know what BDSM stands for.
Right, it's a valuable thing to know about in this world.
Yes, life facts. Where were we?
Yes, back to the Israeli boycott. That stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. For anyone who doesn't know, it was a movement founded by Omar Barghouti in 2005, a man born in Qatar.
Okay.
And many people are on board with it. I forget which member of Pink Floyd. He is also on board with it.
Oh, okay.
I believe Oliver Stone could be, because he's very anti-Israel, and his son even converted to Islam.
Oh, wow.
Which is interesting.
That is interesting.
Different subject for a different day.
Yeah.
But, so let's talk about that, the BDS movement. So where's your position on this? Because I know I've mentioned before that I am in league, not in league, but my heart is with Israel as a homosexual, because I'm a little bit worried about the policies that other Middle Eastern countries have, and the sentiment that I've read many Palestinians have towards that. I wouldn't go to Palestine looking for a gay bar or asking around for it. I'd probably be headless.
Probably not a good idea.
Or something bad would happen to me.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the reason why I see their values as more secular, at least on the surface. You also brought something to my attention, which we're going to get to after we go through the BDS movement. But why are you so in support of Talib and Omar?
Well, because the thing is that, I mean, it's almost like whenever you talk about Israel at all in any type of public forum, it's like you have to give 500 million disclaimers up front before you actually get to your point, which is a problem in itself, because there's no other country that the United States deals with in the world that has the same type of scrutiny or handles things the same way. Obviously, I support the state of Israel. I have a ton of Jewish friends, Jewish origin friends, Israeli friends, both here in Michigan and where I used to live in California and New York. So, I totally support the Jewish people and the state of Israel, their right to exist, and all that stuff. What I have a problem with is the U.S. government, and I just found out about this recently from a local journalist that does an independent podcast in Detroit. If you live in Detroit, you're probably familiar with him. His name is Charlie LaDuff. and I believe it was last week or one of his last podcasts, he dropped that Michigan has a law that basically prohibits anybody from doing business with the state of Michigan in any capacity if you have subscribed to this BDS movement, if you support it. So if you support, standing up for the Palestinian people, and you disagree with the way Israel treats them and handles the Palestinian situation over there, if you support that in any way, shape, or form, then you are prohibited by law from doing business with the state. And it's been passed not only in Michigan now, it's been passed, and I believe I had the numbers here, I believe in 35 other states. And there's also a federal law, and that's what kept Tlaib and Omar, how do you say her name? Omar, yeah. Kept them out of Israel because they support the movement. So my problem is a state government or the federal government or even a local government, because some counties in different states have also adopted these ordinances that prohibit somebody from having a viewpoint on something, basically. So not only does it prohibit it, it mandates, the Michigan law and all these other laws mandate that if you are going to enter into the state to do business, whether you be some type of supplier, say you supply like janitorial like supplies to state offices, or whether you're a charity that runs a soup kitchen on behalf of the state, or maybe you're a contractor that works on the roads and does construction projects, or maybe you're some type of accountant or attorney that represents state matters, any type of capacity whatsoever. When you enter into that contract, there needs to be a clause in there, basically a pledge, but a clause that says that I agree that I do not support the BDS movement against Israel. And not only do I not support it now, I will never support it in the future.
Right.
And if that's not in the contract, you can't do business with the state or the federal government. And if sometime after you sign that contract, you start doing business with the state, it's determined that you or one of your employees or associates or something, was seen maybe at a rally or on the internet, or maybe made a tweet. It could be as simple as a tweet. Anything whatsoever that you somehow support the Palestinians or support this BDS movement, then your contract becomes null and void, and you possibly could be sued civilly, and there could be civil monetary penalties. The scary thing is that in a lot of these states, and also in the federal government, when they were putting this bill through here in Michigan and other places, that several of the states and the federal government tried to put actual criminal statutes in there, to where if you said, hey, I support the Palestinians' right to exist, or I deplore how Israel is treating the Palestinians, or you belong to this BDS movement, then you could actually be put in jail for having that opinion. Wow. Now, we have this thing in the United States called the First Amendment, which means free speech. And the Supreme Court has gone so as far a couple years ago to determine that free speech and money in politics are the same thing, that you should be able to donate money in politics because that's your right of free speech. But yet, you can't rail out or say anything negative against Israel?
Right.
And it doesn't apply to any other state.
Before you go on, let's satisfy some people's skepticism. Could you read some of that boring jargon but important jargon to some of the people at home? Because, what's the law exactly, and what are some of its stipulations? You don't have to read the whole thing, but just some of the highlights.
Yeah, no, I'll read some of the highlights here. So it was passed, at least here in Michigan, it was passed in 2016. And another problem, I have with it, it's long ago, 3 years ago, and it's just now coming to light.
Right.
And that's what I was about to say, that I have another problem I have with just the way legislation has been done, or been accepted lately. This was passed on New Year's Eve in the wee hours of the evening, and when everybody's out partying, the news is all busy and whatnot. But it says, on New Year's Eve, Michigan governor at the time, Rick Snyder, signed 2 anti-BDS bills into law. The bipartisan legislation, which means both Republicans and Democrats in the Michigan, government supported this. Bill 5821, sponsored by Reps Al Pisciola, Mike Carlton, Jeremy Moss, and Andy Shore, and Bill 5822, sponsored by Representative Robert Wittenberg, prohibits the state from hiring businesses that boycott individuals or public entities of a foreign nation, namely Israel. The new law states that the Department of Management and Budget and all state agencies may not enter into a contract with a person to acquire or dispose of supplies, get services, information technology, etc., unless the contract includes a representation that the person is not currently engaged in and an agreement that the person will not engage in the future. The boycott of a person based or doing business with a strategic partner, Israel.
Wow.
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. And I mean, so the official opinion that is put out, well, why would they do something like this? Well, they're trying to say that, well, the Public Acts, protects Michigan's economy from devastating effects of boycotting Israel. Michigan benefits from tens of millions of dollars in annual economic trade with Israeli entities and partners with commercial interests in Israel. The trade encompasses some of the state's most important economic sectors, namely technology, research, research and development, defense, and health sciences. The BDS effort to restrict trade with Israel would threaten the future prosperity of both Michigan and Israel, a danger which Public Acts 526 and 527 effectively mitigate. Now, my first question would be, what the fuck kind of business are we doing with Israel that if people just, boycott, and it's not large-scale boycotts,
Right.
This is, a few people saying their opinion or a small civic group, standing up. It's nothing that actually I've seen to this point has any economic effect. So
Right.
what the hell are we doing with Israel, the state of Michigan?
Right, but it's not only the state of Michigan. You said there was a multitude of states that had
I'll read you the list
that
here.
had similar legislation.
I'll read you the list. So the list, 27 states since 2016 until now, 2019, have already enacted legislation that targets people who boycott Israel for Palestinian rights. Let me read that again. That targets people who boycott Israel for standing up for Palestinian rights. I mean, what the hell? The laws have been enacted by the following states: Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Texas, and Wisconsin.
How much, remind me, John, how many of those are red states and how many are blue other than California?
Oh, God, that's a good question.
There's a lot of
because
swing states in there, too.
Yeah, they swing states in there. So that's the thing. This is another phenomenon about the whole Israeli issue, is that, the Israel and the Israeli lobby, they give a lot of money to both Republicans and Democrats. They're really nonpartisan. So, you can see how money affects politics, because why would somebody from the state of Michigan or any of these other states I listed pass a law to the point that you could criminally be prosecuted and put in jail
Right.
for basically bad-mouthing Israel? Let's break it down. Why would they do something like that on a local level? This isn't the federal government. This isn't a country dealing with another country. This is like a state dealing with another foreign nation. States shouldn't even be in the business of having legislation with foreign nations. It's what
Right.
the national government's for. Now, the other thing that was quite interesting is that in a few states, the people went apeshit about this because apparently it did get out in these states that they were trying to pass this, and the people shot it down and it didn't pass. So in the states of Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, New York, and Wisconsin, the governors, basically disregarded what the voters wanted in what the government voted down and went ahead anyway and enacted executive orders barring the same thing and making it a crime.
So are you saying someone got to them? Someone from the so-called Israel lobby?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the Israel lobby is very powerful, and the Israel lobby, to be clear, isn't just like one group that just sits in Washington.
Right.
It's a network of groups, of charity organizations, of civic organizations.
Officially connected though? And I mean, because we talk about that when we say the alt-right or white supremacists, and they're not an organization in the sense that we typically would know, the way that Boko Haram, Al
Are they
Qaeda.
officially? No, they're not officially connected. They're backdoor connections. I mean,
Right.
Same thing with the DNC or the Republican Party. I mean, you have the National Republican Party, you have the National Democratic Party, and then you have the local entities in the state. But then you have all these civic groups or these, 501(c)(3) groups, people for the ethical government, treatment of people or whatever you want to, they name their organization the United Front for America or whatever they name it. It's just a smokescreen for another entity that raises money, but it all funnels to the top and works on the same agenda, and the Israeli lobby is the same way. So the only reason that a, local state representative or senator would be on board with something like this is if they're getting campaign money or if they're getting pressure from the lobby that, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to put our money towards a candidate to run against you and unseat you. And they're very successful at doing that. So it's a real thing for these elected officials. So, the political climate is morphed to where they almost got these reps and senators by the balls, because they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't.
Right, but this is also why I think so many people were willing to hold their nose and vote for Donald Trump, even though he is not got a whole lot of character traits that they like. It's a sort of realpolitik maneuver where we're just voting for this douchebag. I use that term so much. Maybe I'm a douchebag. Somebody can call me that.
Takes one to know one.
Takes one to know one, I guess. I try not to be. But Trump, he is not one to be bought off. He's the one who gave up his billionaire lifestyle that I can only scarcely comprehend. I've heard he has some crazy helicopter that's as big as my house.
Yeah, he's got some cool toys.
With like gold toilets in them. And so why would you give that up to be president of the United States and be harassed? No, I shouldn't say harassed. I mean, some things he deserves to be harassed for.
Sure.
The grab the pussy thing is absolutely douchey.
Yeah.
But, he's not going up to random women. He's talking about these girls who are working in a certain type of industry, not just porn actresses or whatever, but they're not there to work with their brain. That's not how those women wanted to generate income.
No.
By learning how to be an engineer or going to be a store clerk like everyday people.
No, but you know what? And a side note on that, too, I mean, people forget that was a private conversation that he was having with a guy, talking guy stuff he thought he was off camera. It wasn't like he was going around, to business meetings and dinners and being publicly vocal, saying that everywhere. It was like he was having a off-the-cuff, him and this guy from, was it Inside Edition or Entertainment Tonight?
Yeah, Billy Bush.
Billy Bush. He was having a guy funny conversation talking about chicks and getting chicks and this and that. And he was like boasting and bragging, and he said it, and somebody got him on a mic, and then they've been sitting on that footage or that sound clip for how many years?
Yeah, I think it might have been 2000.
Yeah.
5 or something like that.
Yeah,
It's
so
quite a
like
while ago.
more than a decade before he ever ran for president. I mean,
Well, he ran before that, though.
who, Trump did?
Yeah, he was in the election, the same panel with Mitt Romney.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was the second. I don't remember now if it was the first or the second. I think it was the second Obama term.
Oh, he must have got out real quick. Or man, no, he was talking about. I don't think he ever officially ran.
Oh, yeah,
No,
I
I
could be
don't
totally wrong about that.
Yeah,
I
I
just
don't
had an
think-
Ann Coulter moment right there when they said when,
God.
when she said that
Okay, for the,
Canada
for the
helped.
people that lean a little left that are watching or listening to this program, just
They're
take
like,
a,
yeah, okay,
take a-
you got that one.
take
Sorry,
a deep
guys.
breath. I know he said the words Ann Coulter, but it'll be okay.
Oh, that.
It'll be okay. I know she's loud and annoying, but it'll be okay.
Oh, she's all right. She's fun to impersonate.
So again, I mean, to reiterate, the disclaimer, I have no problem with Jewish people, is the state of Israel, the country of Israel. I have seen firsthand through video documentaries and news reporting, independent news reporting, that there are some real issues and concerns that at least should be talked about between Israel and the state of Israel and how it deals with the Palestinians. I think there are some incredibly suspect and foul things that may be going on over there that should at least be talked about and investigated, because, should they even be 25% true, they're horrendous things. And Israel is a first world country, so for a first world country to be able to, commit, bad things against, another people. I mean, if you take Israel out of the mix and you were to put another country in there, whether it be Switzerland or France or Brazil or Uruguay or Australia, and you put them in the same scenario. Well, you're not allowed to talk about Australia, or you can't do business with the United States or
Right.
the state of Michigan, or, the people of Greenland are,
Right.
killing and torturing and, totally subversing the people of Iceland. I mean, the world wouldn't stand for that, but
During Viking times, that probably would be a likely scenario.
it probably would.
But not now. They've gone far left.
there just can't be. The thing that bothers me about it is the hypocrisy.
Right.
And I'm sorry, no matter whether I love you as a country, I love Paris, France. I would love to be there right now at this moment.
Oh, same here.
But if the state of Michigan started to pass a law that said I can't talk badly about France or the French about anything that they're doing over there,
Right.
I would be just as adamant and pissed off, because you can't tell me as an American citizen that I can't have my First Amendment right to criticize, because it's the whole foundation and thread of this nation.
Right.
The minute you lose that, see, this is a very slippery slope that people really need to wake up and pull their little heads out of their big heinies, because this sets a precedence. Because if this goes unchallenged and people are just blasé to it, then incrementally, what's the next step? And that's what everybody should be scared the shit out of, that your elected local, not even your national, representatives, but your elected local representatives have passed laws, and in some cases tried to make it criminal to where you could be put in jail for voicing your opinion of displeasure about another nation in the world, just for voicing your displeasure. Not even doing
Right.
anything, just saying, whether it's recorded like this or on Twitter, or you write a document about it, or you're overheard having a conversation, and you can be prosecuted, or there could be civil penalties for what comes out of your mouth.
Thought crime.
Yeah, thought crime.
I mean, and it's an interesting. Earlier, I asked you how many of those states that had those types of legislations against Israeli boycotts, or the BDS, how many of those states were Republican? Because it seems right now hypocrisy is bipartisan with regard to the freedom of speech, the First Amendment issue?
Well, it's definitely bipartisan when it comes to Israel. And again, it's, Israel is very, very smart with their political, operations or foreign policy or maneuvering because, it's just like a lot of big corporations do the same thing. So you can't single out Israel. I mean, corporations do it every day with their lobbying, like Big Pharma. Big Pharma gives money to both sides equally.
Right.
Just like big banking, finance, oil, all the big corporations give money equally because they don't know who's going to win, but they need to have, favor with whoever wins.
Is whoever has
so
the power.
it's good strategy. I mean, you can't be mad at the Israelis for trying to put their interests first and doing what's best for their country. I mean, imagine, now look at it this way. Imagine if there were laws, the same exact thing. You could say that, the President of the United States, right? You could say that it's illegal to voice opposition to the President of the United States. I mean, in a majority of the second and third world countries around the world, if you say anything disparaging about the President, the Prime Minister, or the dictator, you can be thrown in jail for that and possibly tortured and killed.
Well, and even in China, if you lose an election, you might go missing.
Yeah, exactly. So what if we had that law in Michigan that especially for the people that hate Donald Trump, what if there was a law that said if you disparage the president whatsoever, then you can be charged with a crime?
Exactly, and this is how it happens to people. And you meet a lot of millennials who think they know their history, but they don't. And I think history is a very useful, that would be an understatement to call it useful. It's vital to navigate this political landscape that America appears to have on the horizon, where people are being denied platforms, being deplatformed if they've already booked speeches.
Yeah.
The way I couldn't believe when Richard Dawkins was banned from speaking at Berkeley University, which is the home of higher education, free speech in higher education.
It used to be. It no longer is.
They pioneered it. They
Yeah.
were the first place to have that movement and those ideas, and now it's all over.
Yeah.
Because Milo Yiannopoulos was going to speak there, and he's a real rabble rouser. Most of the time, when something bad happens at a Milo event, it's by his design.
Sure.
He's not an idiot. He knows what he's doing. Not unlike Trump. Every time Trump says something, it's not unplanned. It's not thought out or discussed. It's he's trying to stir the pot, and he's trying to irritate people. In Sun Tzu, The Art of War, it says when your enemy is persistent and you're in a gridlock, irritate him. And I'm sure Donald Trump has never read Sun Tzu.
Probably not.
But it's an interesting connection, a thing that I actually see him applying, whether he knows about that or not.
Yeah.
And the freedom of speech issue, the Republicans have been priding themselves since Trump's election in 2016 as being the party of free speech.
Yes.
Because of their opposition to political correctness. Interesting, because during the Bush presidency, the people who I found the whiniest with regard to political correctness were the evangelicals who supported George Bush.
Sure.
Nowadays, it's more liberals. You have to, if I'm not gay, I'm not straight, I'm non-gender binary, all these, newspeak Orwellian terms that I don't think people understand how totalitarian that is. I mean, you can use those words if you want, but to compel me to use words like that,
well, yeah,
that's where we have a problem. I don't mind if you're a Christian, but don't, and I'll even go to church if they play nice music and it's Christmas and I love the tradition. I guess I'm a cultural Christian, but don't get mad at me when I don't agree with you or I tell you that I truly believe there's no God. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings.
No, I know, but that's, again, we're in a very scary time, I think, and people don't realize what's going on. They're so caught in the hysteria of everything, and they're caught up in the micro of arguing and chaos and, this side versus that side and this race versus that race and, you're doing this, you're hurting my feelings, you're taking, you're violating my space. You have all this white noise going on, and they're missing the macro, which the macro is is there's a huge monster out there right now that's got their hands around you and they're coming in and gripping tighter. So now we have laws on the books that say if you voice a negative opinion about a foreign nation, you could be not only, civil, you have to pay a fine and civilly lose your business connections with the state you're in if you do business with state, but you potentially could be put in jail for having that opinion, to where universities, not only Berkeley, which should be the flagship of free speech, like you said, but other universities around the country are prohibiting people from coming in and speaking. One of the most enlightening parts of the college experience has always been debate and having people come into colleges with outlandish opinions for the times.
Right.
I mean, you can go back as far as like the 60s, a very volatile time, when you had people like James Baldwin coming onto campuses and talking about, black rights when the civil rights movement hadn't even been passed yet,
right.
and whatnot. That was very, very controversial, especially down south, but he still spoke at those colleges, and it's a good thing he did. So then you morph into the culture we live in that, hey, if I make a misstatement right now, or if I say something off color or something that someone doesn't like, then what, you can rally against me for me to lose my job back in my public life outside of this, or my private life, rather, outside of this? It's careful what you wish for these people that are on the bandwagon that think this is a really good thing, and I think I'm talking to a lot of younger people when I mention that.
That think that the BDS is a good thing? What would young people think is a good thing?
That this culture of political correctness to the point that you're turning it into laws.
Right.
This is a very scary thing. Be very, very careful what you wish for, because there's an old saying, there's no honor among thieves.
Right.
Sooner or later, it's going to bite you. And look, I mean, Bill Maher's a good example of that. He's a total liberal advocate, and they still will come after him.
Very cannibalistic.
Very cannibalistic. So if you live with a bunch of cannibals and there's no food for a while and everybody gets really hungry, guess what? The biggest cannibals are going to kill the youngest and smallest and weakest cannibals and eat you.
Right. And that's a good analogy in a weird way, because the Democrats are like the cannibals who ran out of excess humans that are now going to turn on fellow cannibals because of the desperation that how Trump has stirred the pot so effectively. And you got Joe Biden looks hysterical. I mean, he's their best hope.
Yeah.
Have you seen him late? I want to keep talking about this, but I was just watching him on CNN earlier today.
Yeah.
His responses to things are very indicative of cognitive decline. They're not quite appropriate to what was said to him.
No, but in fairness to him, I mean, here's somebody else that, I mean, I followed Joe Biden, my whole adult life. I mean, he's one of the few, I shouldn't say one of the few Democrats. There used to be a lot of Democrats I like. Joe Biden always seemed like a really decent, funny guy. He doesn't seem too radical one way or the other. He seemed like your typical, to me, like your typical small-town politician that just happened to be in Washington. Hugs babies, knows the locals, does all the things that politicians are supposed to do, does the political speak, are they really going to keep their campaign promises? Probably not, but, a pretty decent guy, you know what you're going to get. But he also is now having to live in this morphed political climate and culture to where people in his own party that are on his own side don't think he's radical enough. And those people are like waiting in the wings, like they're snipers on top of a building waiting to shoot anybody that walks on the street. They're like watching and listening to his every move and every word. And the minute he even stumbles in a sentence or gaffes or whatever, I mean, they're waiting to like shred him. I mean...
Right. But that's, I think, because he is an establishment Democrat who can't be taken too far to the left. Same with Nancy Pelosi, who I'm not in favor of.
Yeah.
Look, the Crypt Keeper, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
But but the more radical people, like the AOCs, who even the Democrat media, the liberal media, so to speak, it's not liberal anymore. I'm a liberal. They're leftists.
Yeah.
But they're distancing themselves from AOC. I heard Anderson Cooper say, well, hey, who's always talking about AOC? Only on Fox News.
Yeah.
Even though Anderson Cooper interviewed her on 60 Minutes, that was the first time I ever heard of her and her policies. She's my age, actually.
Yeah,
It's impressive that she's there. I mean, she seems like a really passionate person, and I'm still not sold out. I'm still not sold on whether she is sincere or stupid or sinister.
Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, she's obviously no dummy, because you don't get elected to Congress by being a dummy.
Exactly.
Folks. She might look dumb. She might act young for her age. She might do these, Facebook live streams where she's laying on her floor putting together tables and, acting all regular and just talking to her base.
Right.
But I mean, for people that have never run for public office or been around the whole process, in order to run, just to be a state senator or representative, especially a U.S. congressperson, you have to learn how the process works first. You not only have to learn how the process works, you have to be taken under the wing and learn, the people in power in your district and your state. You have to fly in that realm. I mean, you can't just say, I'm going to run for Congress. I mean, where are you going to get funding from?
Right.
Who's gonna help you? You have to get buy-in from the party.
Yeah.
So I think she is much more, intelligent and cunning and possibly sinister, or she's just definitely no dummy.
Well, yeah, so we'll take the stupid out of the equation, because you're right. Even when I disagree with her, when she faces down, black belt Republican congressmen who are old enough to be her father or maybe even grandfather.
Yeah.
She handles herself well with these veterans.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in that age, from that generation, and in that sort of conservative culture, they hate seeing an intelligent young person, and maybe even a young woman. I don't know, some of the mentality. I've been surprised at some of the things that my father, who's a corporate veteran himself, some of his associates, they wouldn't be his friends because he's a liberal guy.
Yeah.
But some of his friends have voiced some really goofy opinions about women in the workplace and so on. So there are things that are right about the third wave feminism, but I think it's exaggerated. And once those people, not to be mean, but once they finally die, that mentality will be gone.
Oh, yeah, it will definitely be gone.
To get rid of it, you don't need activism. You just need to wait a few years.
You just need time, right?
So, it's interesting because it's going on both sides. That legislation proves that. It's not only the liberals or the so-called liberals, the Democrats, who have problems with understanding freedom of speech and expression under the First Amendment in your country. It's Republicans are abandoning it too.
Well, yeah.
When it suits their policies. Now, I wanted to also go on to. Or sorry, did you want to make a point?
No, I was just going to say that, folks. I mean, I'm like a broken record on this too. Is that when you get up to Washington, there really, folks, no matter what you see on TV and you hear on the radio and you see online and all the pundits and all that. When you get into Washington, there's really no such thing as Republicans and Democrats. They're all in the same team, folks, and that's big money. It's PAC money, it's lobby money, it's foreign government pressure and money. They're all in the same team, and it's like George Carlin said, it's one big club, folks, and you ain't in it.
That's a good clip. I miss that guy a lot.
I do, too.
We could use his counsel. Between him, George Carlin, and Christopher Hitchens, those are two people that we could really been using now, and unfortunately they passed away because their rhetoric, their razor for reality, the way they, you know, we have the big flush, but they eliminate bullshit in their own way.
Yes.
Especially Hitchens has the Hitchens razor. It's an ideological thing where you eliminate unnecessary information. But we'll get onto that another time for people who like the Hitch slap.
The Hitch slap.
I also wanted to talk about freedom of expression in the corporate context, not legislation, with regard to Tucker Carlson's, and again, we're talking about him, loss of advertisers in light of the recent shooting in El Paso, which was carried out by, you know, a self-proclaimed white supremacist. And I know that you have your conspiracy theories, John. We talked about those last week. For anybody who wants to hear, go to our last episode. John explores the idea that there's a potentiality for a mass white...
a vast right-wing conspiracy?
No. The term false flag operation. I was going to say white flag. God, what's up with me today? So there's a false flag operation, many of them, where a lot of these things are either faked or coordinated through use of drugs. Interesting theory, but we don't go so far as Alex Jones did when he said that the Sandy Hook shooting was faked. We don't have all the information in, and we're not confirming one way or another what's true. We're just giving people food for thought.
Yeah.
But after the shooting, Tucker Carlson was saying something about the arrival of certain immigrants makes our own country poorer and dirtier and more divided within the context of the El Paso shooting and the ideology that the shooter professed to have. So he had dozens of advertisers, including Pacific Life, Farmers Insurance, SodaStream, and they were distancing themselves from him because of his increasingly, quote, white supremacist rhetoric. So he, after this recent shooting, smaller companies like the meditation app Calm, and there is a lending startup called SoFi, they followed suit and, you know, left Mr. Carlson behind. So he's been experiencing these waves of people leaving him behind, of advertisers terminating their contracts with him, I should say. So that is a more corporate form of gagging people from saying their political beliefs. Whether you agree with Carlson or not, I don't like his rhetoric. It's blankety to say all of certain immigrants will make our country poorer and dirtier and more divided. I wouldn't blame the division on immigrants at all. I would blame it on politicians and the media.
Absolutely.
So, where do you stand on advertisers leaving because of the direction of the political wind of late?
I think advertisers are big pussies, is what I think. I think advertisers, I mean, they absolutely have the right to spend their money and advertise for their products and their company any way they want. So it's not a matter of that. I mean, of course they have the right. And, you know, depending what your product or your service or you know, industry is, I mean, you want to market and advertise things, you know, in places where it benefits the company, that reaches your base of customers. So, you know, if your base of customers is, you know, exclusively or the majority of people with a certain ideology, then I think it might make sense to, you know, pull your funding. But, you know, if your customer ideology is a certain way, maybe you shouldn't have advertised in that place in the first place, when there's the potential there for things that are going to be said or presented that are going to make, you know, your base upset or angry because you sponsor them. But, I mean, you have companies like, I don't know, Coca-Cola, which is a soft drink. So a soft drink is something that people across all nationalities, political divides enjoy. Maybe you like Coke, maybe you like Pepsi, maybe you like ginger ale. It doesn't matter. I mean, so this is a general product that should be able to be advertised to everybody. And I don't know, again, it's like what we were talking about a few minutes ago, that it gets to that slippery slope of control or free speech control. I mean, again, Tucker Carlson, whether you like him or not, I mean, he has a political-based show which has opinions. It's an opinion. He's basically an op-ed guy that leans right and talks about more conservative issues. So if you're the marketing company or if you're the marketing manager for a brand that buys advertising space on his show, you have to be a moron to think that at some point in time during one of his shows, something isn't going to come out of his mouth or one of his guests' mouth that's going to be controversial.
Right, and the guest element is what really puts the icing on the cake, because every night he's going to have somebody different on.
Sure.
You don't know if he's going to be talking to the former Grand Cyclops of the KKK or the former. I think David Duke was actually the Wizard, Grand Wizard.
Oh yeah.
And he's
it's like you can look back on an extreme example, and not to bring Israel back into the mix or their power on things, but years ago, Arsenio Hall had a talk show, and he said that he wanted to bring Louis Farrakhan on, and the network top chiefs executives said, "You bring Farrakhan on and you're done, pal." And he's like, "Why? Nobody will, at least we need to talk to this guy and hear what he has to say, because there's all this controversy and all these people are accusing him of being anti-Semitic and a racist. And well, let's at least bring him on to hear what he has to say."
Exactly, yeah.
And he brought him on, and 3 days later they canceled his show.
Wow.
So, I mean, do I like what Farrakhan or someone like Farrakhan says? No. Should we have the grand poobah of the KKK on a TV talk show? Probably not. And there's some that, especially from a Israeli or Jewish point of view, would look at someone like Farrakhan the same way as a David Duke. So that's a pretty extreme case, but I don't know.
But I remember being in Europe where they had a similar issue with the Holocaust denier David Irving, who is a self-professed or self-educated historian who I've heard certain things, observations that he's made that were actually accurate, that have nothing to do with the Jews, nothing to do with certain, the racial element, but circumstances of where, what Himmler was up to at certain points that are really illuminating. He found letters that were nobody else bothered looking for. So he had a couple, like, let's say out of 10, he's got 2 good points, okay? And the rest of it, then he goes on to talk about how the concentration camps in Europe are artificial, that they're fabricated, and that they were designed simply to make a case for the state of Israel, the founding of the state of Israel, which is what Holocaust denialism is ultimately underlined by. The ultimate objective, just in the same way religion is all about eternal life and paradise. So he went to Austria and was actually incarcerated because they have very strict laws about freedom of speech, about, speech or promotion of National Socialist ideas.
Yes.
You can't have swastikas. I don't even think you can give a Sieg Heil, even if you're joking. You can get in trouble.
Uh-oh, you're going to get in trouble just for doing that.
Just for sticking your right arm in the air with your palm down flat.
Right.
And saying HH. So he is a guy who I wouldn't like. He's a known racist. He lives, I think he has a home in Florida. He's an Englishman, but he has a home in Florida. And, he celebrates Hitler's birthday every April. There was an occasion where some African-American guy on his bike accidentally bumped into him, and he called him, "You stupid N-word."
Oh, wow.
And so there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he's a full-on racist. And, but my opinion was always that he should be exposed. People should hear what he has to say so he can embarrass himself.
Well, yeah, and I think that's important, too. I mean, I'm someone that believes that the earth is round, and there are people that believe adamantly that the world is flat.
Flat earthers, yeah.
So, do we just ban them from places? I mean, if Tucker Carlson goes on and says, hey, the world's flat and y'all are stupid, does that mean, you know, Coca-Cola should pull its ads because he's saying such an outlandish thing? No, I don't think so. Because every once in a while, and this, I mean, that's the thing people got to keep in mind, is every once in a while, somebody that says really outlandish things, it comes back around and ends up being true. I know that there's been a lot of people over the years that have talked about how fluoride is really bad for you, and they put it in the water to dumb people down and to control people. There's evidence that Hitler used it to control the Jews and dumb down the Jews and keep them in a docile state. There's evidence that it's very, very hard on the pineal gland in the brain. It's very hard on your bones, making them degrade and become brittle. And it was always, you know, said that they put fluoride in the water, you know, for dental care to make your teeth strong. Well, why would you ingest something if it's a topical thing that goes on your teeth? Well, lo and behold, you know, for years people have been ridiculed like, oh, that's ridiculous, you're nuts. This past week, I forget which university came out with a study that shows in 4 to 5-year-olds that have had fluoride, it drops their IQ like significantly. There's proof, studied proof now, that it drops their IQ significantly.
Wow.
So guess what? All those people that were saying fluoride's been bad all these years, that you laughed at, that you made fun of, that said we're wingnut conspiracy theorists, guess what? They weren't wrong. So I guess coming back full circle to your point about should advertisers pull their money, I think it's no, I don't think they should. Because, again, you know, it's a political show. It's not like, you know, you're having, like Coca-Cola didn't tell, you know, him what to say. Coca-Cola didn't force him to say anything. They're not directly responsible for what he said. And the fact that people will get together and demand, stand up. Why don't you say stand up for once as a brand? Like if I was a CEO of a brand and we didn't do anything wrong, I would be like, you know what? We're not pulling our funding. It's a political show. You know, but everybody's been pushed into this corner because, you know, certain small vocal minority, they always say the vocal minority is stronger than the silent majority. It's true. And it's the same thing with corporate pressure. If you think your sales are going to drop, you know, for a quarter and you know, your stock report's going to be bad,
right,
you're going to freak out because the investors and the board of directors is going to, you know, oust you. You're going to bow to the pressure.
Right, exactly. And I mean, most of these brands don't attach themselves with any group, idea, or political pundit for genuine altruistic reasons. Not too long ago, I was at Toronto Gay Pride, and there's all kinds of Johnson & Johnson, General Electric, all of these different brands that are in league with this. And by the way, I think about 50% of the people at that parade were straight. Which is always the funniest thing about those parades. But, you know, do you think that I think Johnson & Johnson and any of these other companies really are solid with the LGBT situation? Or
probably not. I mean, I would imagine that the heads of those CEOs are probably wealthy, upper, well-to-do guys that, or ladies that matter from that echelon of society that, you know, probably have their own personal opinions on LGBT that might not necessarily reflect the company's position on LGBT, because, you know, it is not in this day and age, culture-wise, and just, you know, for the right reasons, it's not right to, you know, have your business discriminate, you know, against people like that. But that doesn't mean privately they don't have views that, you know, are different. And that goes across all lines.
Yeah.
Not just LGBT.
Well, it's very superficial. Not to get too off topic, because this is a tangent. We're talking about advertising. Many years ago, just to account for how much the political direction has changed, there was a group called the Million Moms, and Ellen DeGeneres was, sort of the cover girl for J.C. Penney, and the Million Moms wanted to not oust her, but to eliminate her from their campaigning, from J.C. Penney's campaigning, and using a lesbian as a promotional tool.
Right.
And I remember even Bill O'Reilly, conservative, head up his ass like the mayor in the movie Jaws, asshole, defended Ellen DeGeneres because I think at the end of the day he believed in, not just freedom but corporate freedom, because he believes that people should be able to make money in whatever way they can. And I think that Trump's the same, to be honest with you. He'll do business with anybody that can make him money.
Well, yeah. And see, this is a very, talk about, people bitch about capitalism and, especially people that lean far left. But, some of them have such radical views on things. Like their vision of business is that, no matter what it is, whether you make gourmet popcorn or you manufacture, leather handbags, or no matter what you think, you only want people that think like you buying your products. And you would be appalled if a Trump supporter bought one of your handbags. I won't allow a Trump supporter to buy one of my handbags. Go fuck yourself. You're not allowed in my store. Just like, some restaurants have they threw out, oh God, what's her name? I know that they ran Candace Owens out of a restaurant recently.
Because of Maxine Waters. Maxine Waters had this crazy rallying cry to go for every citizen to go after Republicans and congresspeople and senators and so on.
Yeah, so who the fuck is she? Go fuck yourself, Maxine Waters. You can't do that. So if you run a business and you're very progressive or liberal-minded, and you only want certain people that think like you to buy your products or to have access to your products or services, you only want your products or services advertised to that select group, and everybody else is the enemy and go die somewhere, guess what? You're not going to be in business very long.
Right. So white supremacy is the context under which Carlson's potential exodus of advertisers is based off of. So he was saying some things about immigrants in light of the El Paso shooting, and I don't really, not going to say he can't say what he wants to say. It's a free country. We are talking about the First Amendment here. But, it was bad timing. That's all I would say. I wouldn't recommend that timing. I wouldn't have the conversations under the same umbrella. But having said that, we did mention white supremacy as being not a smaller problem than it actually is, because yes, people are dying, and there are these rogue groups and rogue individuals like Dylan Roof who are espousing these ideas and acting homicidally upon them. Having said that, we are discussing reverse racism, okay, which I think Bill Maher thinks is a bullshit idea. I don't think it is. I think anybody who doesn't like somebody because of their different skin color or ethnicity to them, that's all racism. Racism is not just defined as white people only being offensive to non-white people or contemptuous of non-white people. It exists in multiple contexts. We mentioned at the beginning of the segment, or at the beginning of the show, rather, that in your city of Detroit in early July, when we were both gone, they had the Afro Future event, where non-people of color were charged $20 for a ticket and everybody else was charged $10. What was interesting about that was the person who brought attention to that was one of the African-American performers, Tiny Jag. She was she was not going to be paid for the performance, she told CNN. Once the rapper caught wind of the prices, she said she was triggered, quote unquote.
So you mean to tell me what you're saying is that they were going to charge one price for people of color or everybody else, and white people had to pay double?
Yes. So, and this is actually the quote from Tiny Jag. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. I haven't had the privilege of listening to her music or following her yet. But she said, a non-POC, that is non-person of color, non-POC friend of mine brought to my attention that Afrofuture is requiring non-people of color to pay twice the amount to attend the festival as POC, people of color.
So what the fuck is what non-POC? Non-people, so you mean white people? Well, you're going to give some fancy term that's trying to hide what it is.
It's euphemistic jargon.
Yeah, like used car is a pre-owned vehicle. Bullshit.
Yeah.
So white people. Let's be clear.
And then she went on to say, so this must have happened at the end of June, actually. We were still gone then. But she tweeted on July 2nd, this does not reflect the views of myself or the Tiny Jag team. I will not be playing this show. I apologize for anyone who may have been triggered or offended. She's biracial. Mm-hmm. Her grandmother is white, and I'm sure she has white people on her team. And how many white people are going to go there that are not in support of the cause? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like we're on your side here. This is what we mean by cannibalism and how preposterous that is. Could you imagine the meeting where they made that decision? The round table of discussion. Yeah, we're just going to charge people that we don't like double, regardless of whether or not their ideology is in league with ours or they support us. We're going to punish them for their skin color. So they didn't actually have the event like that. They charged everybody the same price. But if, you know...
Hashtag whack jobs.
Yeah.
I would like to know the adult that raised these people, because I'd like to go knock the snot out of them.
Well, they're probably worse.
They probably are.
They're probably worse.
I mean, I don't know this group. I've never heard of them. Living in Detroit, and actually I'm pretty well connected with most of the music and social scene in Detroit.
Right.
I have not heard of them. So I hate to make any assumptions as to who they are. I mean, my initial thought is they're probably a group of younger kids.
Afrofuture youth.
Yeah, okay, so they're just, some adult is directing them, and then, you know, what they say, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. Mm-hmm. I think it's like that. I mean, to even suggest for a moment that a person of non-color, a white person, would have an event that said, you know, Indian people or Asian people or black people or anybody, we're going to charge you a 20% premium on the ticket, because that would ignite a firestorm. You would have all the satellite trucks from MSNBC and Fox and CNN pulling up in front of that place to interview people. It would be a story for a week straight nonstop.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what these kids were thinking. I don't know who's running this organization, but obviously they're an idiot and they're an instigator. And they shouldn't be poisoning young minds. See, there's videos that I've seen before. I don't remember if they're public service videos, but in imagery I've seen before where, you know, you see 2 or 3 little, you know, 1-year-olds playing with each other, a little African-American baby, a white baby, an Asian baby, you know, maybe a Latino baby, and they're all playing in harmony. And it's not until some stupid-ass adult poisons their mind and teaches them what racism is and, you know, that you're affected by it till they ever even realize there's a thing called racism. So
right.
for a youth group to act like this, there's some adult leading the charge through the youth, which I think is appalling and horrendous.
Right, right. Well, it's not, and we don't know if that's a member of or a leader of that organization or whether it's the damn parents.
No, it could very well be, because if they're youth, what's the age? If they're under 18, they can't do anything legally like book a hall or sign contracts for entertainment or an event, especially a major rap performer. So there have to be adults involved. And I applaud the rapper. What'd you say, Little Jag? Or
her name is Tiny Jag.
Tiny Jag.
Yeah.
I applaud her
Likewise.
for taking a stand like that, because it's not right. I mean, I did a little work for Janet Jackson back in the day on one of her tours. I can't imagine Janet Jackson you know, her entourage of dancers and technical people and crew people is one of the most multiracial. There's plenty of people of non-color working for her. I can't imagine, you know, her performing at an event or anything, whether it's charity or not, where they're going to have different price structures based on your race or your skin color.
Right, exactly.
That's like the definition of racism and bigotry.
Exactly. And I think it's coming back now. When we look at the history of racism, we're not going to start, everyone knows we start with slavery, then you go on to segregation and Jim Crow. And then after, there seemed to be this period where, and I wasn't alive then, maybe you can help me with this, John.
Well, what are you saying, Zach?
Oh, I'm not saying anything. You're
saying I'm an old man?
No, I'm saying you are I'm looking for a good term. I'm thinking for a good, like...
Kick the dust off them, folks.
No. What's a good PR term? You are a...
Careful, our advertisers might be watching.
Oh,
You're about to make age-despairing comments, so people that advertise Depends are going to pull their funding from our program.
You are wealthy with years, with the years.
I am wealthy with...
I could have done that better, but you know where I'm going.
I'm wise like an owl. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
What? I'm funny. What do I amuse you?
Like I'm a clown. Like I'm here to fucking amuse you. How the fuck am I?
Fucking old. I got wisdom. Is that what you're trying to tell me? I got wisdom because I'm old. How many rings I got if you cut my arm off like a tree?
Oh, John.
I know. So, yes, I'm very wise, Zach. What would you like to know? What would you like to ask the old wizard?
It just seemed like there was... I remember I was just a kid. The first time I ever really watched the news was because my dad would be watching me, you know, and he was really following the OJ case because he was such a big OJ fan. And I think it killed him that that happened and that he did that and he didn't want to believe it, like a lot of people didn't. And that sort of seemed to have reignited the racial tension for a little while. I've heard that articulated.
I followed that case pretty closely. No, you know what? I don't think the OJ case did it. I mean, there were some people of color that were, when he got acquitted, they're like, you know, you people are still talking, you know, they acquitted him, so why can't a black man get acquitted of a crime, you know? We're happy he got acquitted. I mean, because he was a sports hero, and he was always a very likable figure, whether he was on a TV show. Or I mean, I loved him. I thought O.J. was great as a kid. I mean, he was always funny, you know, and seemed like a decent all-around guy, great athlete, you know, well-spoken. I mean, a great personality. And whatnot, but I think what may have really reignited, you know, at least the start of it, was two things. One was the Tawana Brawley case in New York, where Al Sharpton came out and said that the Tawana Brawley, I believe, God, it's been so many years, was either beaten or raped. I think it was raped by some white guys. And it turned out that the whole story was false. And Al Sharpton came out, and it was very divisive. It was in the news.
Right.
The news every day for seemed like a year or better. And then it came out that she lied about everything, and there was never an apology. Al Sharpton never ever, you know, came out and said, you know, he was wrong or anything, and just was like, fuck you, you know. White people have, you know, so if a black person did this, big deal, you know, because white people do more nefarious shit. And it was kind of like that type of rhetoric at the time. And the other thing that I think was a catalyst or starting it back up was the...
Trayvon Martin?
No, way before that. It was back in Los Angeles, the Rodney King beating.
Ah, yes.
Because, you know, it was pretty clear to any human being with a brain that watched the tape, which was very public. Everybody saw it.
Yeah.
Nobody saw different versions of different tapes. Everybody saw the same thing from the different angles.
They had different angles? I thought it was a single shot aerial.
It could have been a single shot.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, everybody had the same axis in view, and anybody with any type of a logical brain whatsoever saw that a bunch of cops beat the bloody hell out of an unarmed guy. I mean, it was disgusting what they did. And they got acquitted. And, you know, when that happened, I mean, obviously, you know, everybody knows it set off days and days of riots in Los Angeles, to the point where, you know, a lot of shop owners were on top of their buildings with assault rifles, you know, trying to protect their building because they were looting and burning shops, and not even white people. I mean, Korean and Asian Americans were, you know, very vehemently protecting their businesses with weapons. I mean, it was like a battle zone. It was equivalent to the riots in the 60s in Detroit in the late 60s. So I think those two incidents really, really put racial tension back in the news. And then, of course, the news always likes a good race bait story that they can run with and profit off of.
Right. Well, I mean, you know what you just reminded me of, and maybe, John, you could add this to the show notes so that if people want to just fast forward to the subject, they can. It's the Eric Garner case, which I almost forgot all about because it took so long to ascertain what happened, even though it was, and this was a single shot, was covered by a single shot off somebody's phone where, you know about the Eric Garner case?
There's been so many. Which one was
Eric
that?
Garner was the African-American gentleman. He was in Manhattan in New York City, and he would buy a pack of cigarettes.
Oh, yeah, that was choked to death.
And he was choked to death. He began by resisting arrest.
Yes.
He didn't have a gun. He began by resisting arrest, and he was a big guy, but how unprofessional is it for 5 police officers have to jump and resort on top of him, gang up on him, and resort to that kind of thing? And they did ascertain that the chokehold, the sleeper that they put him in, was not even sanctioned by the NYPD.
Yeah.
So they got rid of him. They fired him finally after 3 years, and I'm glad that he's fired. I don't understand why he's not being prosecuted in some way.
Yeah.
Or at least nobody's trying to prosecute him. That's something that's strange to me. But even there, as much as that bothered me and disturbed me, and the guy I believe he had children, he had family, and he did not seem like a dangerous criminal. He was a bit like the Roma people, the gypsies used to be in Europe, and they're hated, and over there, all they would want to do is steal the pie from a windowsill or a sheet while it's hanging out to dry, but they're not evil people or scary people, petty criminals, if you know what I mean, pickpockets and so on. And that, in this case, Mr. Garner was committing a very petty crime, which I'm going to say it right now. When I was in New York City, I would want a cigarette, and, you know, I don't want to buy a whole pack, and guy's going to sell me one for $1 or $2. Why not, right? So, you know, what they did was awful, and I don't think that they intended to do that. It was negligence.
Right.
But it was not, I can't say that it was racially motivated. Hard to believe that.
I don't know. I mean, the problem with situations like that are, you know, what's called selective enforcement of the law. I mean, the law is the law, so if it is, you know, an ordinance or it's against the law to sell to sell cigarettes outside of a party store, just like it would be illegal to go in and buy a 12-pack of beer and then sell it to minors or whoever outside. I mean, yeah, it's a petty crime. It's definitely a nonviolent crime, although it could have, you know, impacts. If a minor bought the cigarette, you know, not supposed to be smoking, cigarettes are harmful to your health. I mean, or just like anything, jaywalking, a parking ticket. I mean, you have to enforce the law equally among everybody. So was it racially motivated? I don't know. Possibly. I mean, if that would have been a big white guy standing there selling cigarettes, would they have frisked him and stopped him? And I think that might have been one of the issues. And knowing the area where it happened, I would honestly say the odds are if it was a white guy selling cigarettes there, he probably wouldn't have been stopped, and he probably wouldn't have been treated the same way. But then there's also, you know, you can't, and this happens all the time, whether it's something petty like this or whether it's a major incident like that leads up to a shooting. You know, when the police give you a directive and tell you to do something, it's what's called a lawful order. You have to do it. And I guess I was lucky. When I was raised as a kid, my father instilled in me from a very young age, even if you're 100% right, John, if the police tell you to do something, you don't hesitate, you don't give them gruff, you just do it. You be polite and you do it. And then if they're wrong and you were right, you will have your day in court, and then you fix it there. But to think that you're going to get in a pissing match with a cop on the street and you're going to come out any sort of winner, you're a fool. Don't do it. It'll backfire on you every time. And I get it. I mean, if you live in an area, or if you're a hustler and you're out doing that all the time, and or if you're a certain minority and the police, stop you more than other people, or you feel like you're being harassed, I can understand how it can get very, very frustrating. It's like, God bless it, not again. Like, won't you people leave me the hell alone?
Right.
There's shootings here, there's carjackings here, the home invasions here, and you're worried about me selling one cigarette to this guy? I mean, I totally buy into that. It's ludicrous. I mean, the Detroit Police Department doesn't have the best reputation as far as time. I mean, on a weekend, if you call the police for, somebody broke into your car, you're not going to get a car to come. So if even one police officer has the time to worry about somebody selling a cigarette outside a 7-Eleven downtown, when there's all this other debauchery and they don't even have enough cops to handle all the violent calls coming in,
Right.
then absolutely, I agree 100%. What the hell are you doing messing with this guy?
Yeah.
It should have never happened.
Right, and it's in a big city environment, with the whirl and the rash of everything that's going on. And I noticed this when I go to Detroit, too. There's all kinds of illegal driving things people do that they wouldn't get wouldn't get away with in a smaller community where the police have less to focus on.
Absolutely.
Here in Canada, which has, depending on where you are, a lot less, aggravated crimes like homicide, home invasions where everybody gets murdered or worse than that, raped before murdered. In situations like over here in Canada, it's not so much prevalent, which makes our police force quite petty, especially with driving tickets, going after old ladies who, are swerving on the road a little bit. And they have quotas, too, these cops. So sometimes I even think, in the case of Mr. Garner's demise, that there's an element of, oh, look, this is a easy way to get a quote, to satisfy the quotas.
You have to take into account, too, and I don't remember the particulars of this particular case, but, did the store owner call the police? Did he complain? Did he say, hey, I got undesirables outside of my store selling cigarettes. I don't want people loitering in front of my store. Was it that case? Did the police, happen by there and see the crime in progress, even though it was a minor crime? I mean, if you're a cop and you see a very minor crime, like did somebody just roll a stop sign? I mean, that's a pretty minor crime, especially if there's nobody around. Do you just ignore that because it's a minor crime? And that's why I said earlier, universal enforcement of the law. So, if the cops are just, harassing the guy because they know him, I mean, it makes a huge difference as, why were they dealing with the guy in the first place? If the store owner called the police and the police had the time to send a car out to answer the store owner's complaint, they're the police. They have to do that. Right. They can't just blow off a call. They just can't, especially if they have the time and resources to handle the call. So if they go there and investigate and find out, the guy's committing a petty crime and, we're going to write you a ticket for it, and you start, being, belligerent with police, that's not going to end up good for you.
Right. And I mean, I think the problem is if you watch the video again, I know he did, it initially started with Mr. Garner resisting arrest, rather.
Yeah.
And he was a big guy, so a few people had to subdue him in some way because of the situation. And again, like, he wasn't supposed to be doing that. At the end of the day, once they got him on the ground, even from the cell phone that it was recorded on, you can hear the man saying, "I can't breathe."
Yeah.
He stopped struggling, and they did not stop holding him down by the neck. So I'm glad that that cop got fired, and I'm really sad that he
I am too.
lost his life.
And
that
again,
way.
in the context of everything, I think it's horrible. But I almost guarantee you 100% that if Mr. Gardner hadn't resisted arrest,
Right.
he would be alive.
Yeah, exactly.
So bottom line is, I mean, if you're being harassed, even if it's a regular thing, you got to maintain your patience and composure. You cannot fight, even with your mouth. You can't fight back against the police. You're just not going to win. It's just dumb. It's just dumb. And your life is way too precious. What's worse, a $95 ticket and a trip down to the station, you know, or your life? When you put value to things, you really got to get your mouth. You really got to voice your opinion and take it to that level. It's not worth it. Just the police give you a lawful order, just follow it, and then get yourself an attorney if you've been wronged, or go down and yell at the judge. I guarantee you, it's better than the alternative.
Right. There would be people who would take umbrage with that, because they would say you're too complacent, that if people that is the kind of complacency that allowed the Gestapo and the SS and the Stasi secret police in East Germany. Complacency was what allowed those horrible regimes to go on for so long. You know, so I think you would have to also understand the nature of the country, like what kind of police system is this? I've always thought, after my experience in Europe, that America, and even to an extent Canada, have much more in common with the police state than anywhere I lived before. So when I came, and I think it was going on my way from America to Canada, so this would not have been the Americans. You get to the Canadian border, and there's attack dogs, barbed wire, and they're all after your money, like if you spent money on tobacco or alcohol, million questions, black suits, boots up to the knees. And I wasn't exposed to that kind of security state for a very long time, so it freaked me out a little bit. And I wonder if you're being complacent by saying that, but I would definitely agree that it's wise not to resist arrest, particularly when you look at Michael Brown.
Yeah, I mean,
because he had a gun.
Look, yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, there was a time, when I got out of school, all through the 90s, there was a time when they had what was called community-oriented policing, where if you got in trouble as a kid, whatever it was, if you were out with your buddies and you caught drinking in the car, a lot of times, especially if you lived in the city, the police would make you dump out the booze, and they would take you home to your parents, and the wrath of your parents was way better than anything that the criminal justice system could do to you.
Right.
And over time, the policing changed. I mean, it changed a lot in the 2000s when, the Obama administration gave, militarized equipment to the police, and the police started slowly morphing into this more militarized version. I mean, you see it now. We just had a barricaded gunman situation in Detroit last night or the night before last, and the news footage shows these armored tank-looking vehicles that belong to the local police department surrounding this guy's house with all these stormtrooper SWAT guys, looking more like military guys than SWAT guys, and police officers. So it's changed. I mean, there was a time when if you had a knife or a club in your hand or some type of weapon other than a gun, that the police would call a bunch of police and they'd, get backup, and then they would overpower you and fight you down to the ground and arrest you. Nowadays, they will shoot you.
Right.
And it's become, and again, you're right about complacency, because when it started to go that way and police started shooting people instead of what I call manning up and being cops, Americans sat quiet. And so then it just kept going. Well, if we can do it in this minor situation, then obviously we can do it in a serious situation. And fast forward now a decade and a half, and now you see shootings all the time. When I was younger, there weren't police shootings of anyone all the time, here and there. But nowadays, I mean, the way the culture and climate is, unless your parents, raised you in a bubble and didn't give you any direction in life or whatsoever, or you didn't have any parents or anything, and you're of legal age, which is 18 or older, you should know that if you come at the police, even without a weapon, nowadays they will shoot your ass. So why on earth would you challenge them?
Right.
Or why on earth would you think you personally have some type of special get-out-of-jail-free card in your wallet to where you're going to be the exception, that if you lunge at the police, they're not gonna do that. And in fairness to the police, I mean, when I was younger, I used to ride along with law enforcement because at one time I had given some thought of being a policeman, and I've seen scenarios firsthand live as they unfold. And police do have a very difficult job and
Right.
a very dangerous job. And I mean, somebody can be acting like they're going to comply and be the most polite person, and in an instant they pull out a gun and
Right.
you don't know where it comes from, and you're shot. And people have watched too much television and think that there's some perfect magical scenario where if a bad guy comes along and even if he pulls out a gun, that the police are, trained and have special, tactical abilities, like there's some type of superhero where they can just respond perfectly and do, and handle it. That's not true. So when a police officer comes up to somebody that's either aggravated or not wanting to comply, they have in the back of their mind, I'm not really asking them for that much. I'm asking them to comply. I'm asking them to see their ID. I'm asking them some questions. Why are they being so hostile?
Right.
Why aren't they just complying? So it's like, okay, there must be a reason. Well, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
What could be more nefarious going on?
Right.
And then they have to think about their own lives. Like, is this guy going to move suddenly? I mean, if this guy comes at me, I mean, go on to YouTube. You can search police shootings. You can search police officers shot or killed. And there's numerous videos, dash cam footage of police officers on traffic stops or in some, domestic thing that they've been called to where everything looks like it's going great. And then a split second out of the blue, a person pulls out a gun or a knife, and this poor cop is just, blindsided and now laying on the ground dying. So it's real for the police. So, going back to the Eric Garner, big guy, I mean, maybe he wasn't carrying a weapon, whatever, but you see a big guy that can overpower you. I mean, it only takes a second for a big guy to sit on top of you, roll you around, and grab for your gun and blow your head off.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be fair to the police as well when they have a scenario like that, because most people do comply. They might be a little mouthy, but most people do comply when the police give them a directive. Could I see your ID? What are you doing here? Could you please step out of the car? Put the car in park, step around the back of the vehicle. Most people are like, yes, officer, yes, officer.
Right.
So when somebody doesn't comply, it's going to put the police officer on guard. I'm sorry.
Right. But I mean, this is over cigarettes, and, the guy didn't have a gun. it was petty, and I think it probably annoyed him, like you were saying earlier about how a lot of people frequently have problems with police for minor misdemeanors like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, like I said, I think the fact that that poor man got killed is terrible, especially over a cigarette. I mean, such a minor thing,
right?
You know, but as much as I'm glad the police officer was fired and everything transpired the way it did after the fact, I still contend that if Mr. Gardner had just complied, he'd be alive right now. I mean, they wouldn't have just, if he would have complied and just been like, all right, fuck, okay, here, write me a ticket, okay, here's my ID, all right, you motherfuckers, yeah, again, all right, yeah, oh, you gotta mess with me, I'm a black man, whatever, here, arrest me. If he would have been like that, he'd be alive.
Point taken.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So also lately we've been hearing a lot of the anti-Trump sentiment has slowly been becoming anti-American sentiment by Americans themselves. We had Bill Maher, again, good old Bill Maher.
This guy
always gives us something to talk about.
Not Bill Nye, the science guy?
No, yeah, I could see him mouthing off to somebody. He went on his show before because he's for, and I don't agree with everything, talks a lot about climate change. He's not actually an expert on the subject, which I didn't know before. But I can't help but like him because I liked him a lot when I was a child, and that stuck with me. And, he could say the sky is red, and I'll, turn a blind eye to it, or a blind ear, rather.
I like little children. Could you turn a blind eye to that?
No.
Okay, good.
No, actually, we'll have to talk about that another time. Just read a study recently. Before we get on the Bill Maher thing.
Yes.
It is relevant because he disses the church, but I was reading an article. It's a study published by Dr. Antoon Lenars, who's an expert on homicide and suicide, and he's a forensic psychologist, a little bit like Hannibal Lecter for any Thomas Harris fans out there. He wrote a study on how pedophile priests target their victims. They don't just go after any little boy or girl, usually boy. They study the parents. And they find the most head-up, because we were just talking about head-up-their-ass mentors that raise these douchey kids.
Right.
They look for head-up-their-ass parents who want really strict control over their kids' lives. They're in church because they want them to be good Catholic kids.
Right.
The catechism, the confirmation, the choir, and if there is a problem that prevents them from having their child from having that experience, they'll enter a state of denial, and they'll say, well, you're just trying to get out of going to church. And Dr. Lenars, every time he's had to give therapy to a child like that, or who grew up into a man or a young woman, they almost without fail had a parent like that, sort of a corporate, conservative, religious parent who accused their own child of just trying to get out of something. And that's how they targeted their victims. And I'm starting to use the past tense. I'd like to hope that's a past tense thing since the prosecution wave began. But I think it'll always go on, man. I think it's been going on since the beginning of the church itself.
I think so, too. I don't think that'll ever stop. It's just, I don't know. It's like human nature is an unexplainable and evil thing sometimes.
Right, and especially when you have a position of trusted authority.
Oh yeah, but that makes sense, because if you're observant, I mean, usually priests are pretty connected with the family, coming to the church, and they get to learn their parishioners and stuff. And if they see a pattern where the parent is dismissive, then it's definitely a better target for them, because then if the kid goes running back telling some wild tale, especially back in that time frame when none of this was all public yet, back in the 60s and 70s and 50s and 40s, for that matter, when it was taboo, no one's going to believe you. So it's very sick, but very slick.
Right. So back to Bill Maher. Just wanted that interesting side note before I forgot about it. Back to Bill Maher. He was talking about how he is looking forward to recession, was hoping for a recession as a way of getting Trump out of office, and that's an opinion not only held by him. There's many other Democrats who want to get Trump out of power and would look forward to the idea of a recession or some kind of chaotic situation. It's a little bit like how Adolf Hitler rose to the vacuum in power during hyperinflation in Germany. You know, he took a horrible situation to advance his political ambitions. Where do you stand on all of this anti-American sentiment from major people?
Sure, if you want a recession, that's fine, as long as the recession affects you too, Bill. I mean, if we go into a recession, I mean, it's not going to affect Bill Maher. Bill Maher's got a lot of money from his shows and being able to have his opinion in this great nation that protects, or at least allegedly protects, your right to say and think whatever you want. I think, again, it's a lot of pandering and a lot of horse shit. I mean, where's the flushing sound when we need it? You know, you're gonna wish harm on people, you know, for something unpopular that you don't like. That, again, what people on that side of the aisle fail to accept to be reality is about 50% of the voters or thereabouts, give or take, you know, voted for the guy and liked the guy. So guess what? Every other person isn't so hateful towards him. Right. So you want to bankrupt the nation, or you want people to go through hardship because you're not happy about, you know, the political leader of the country? I mean...
Well, not to mention the fact that he's in one of the few recession-proof industries. Entertainment businesses have always done well. Historically, they made a lot of great movies during the Great Depression.
Sure. If things go bad, then his ratings will go up because he'll have more to bitch about, and then he'll have more people bitching with him because things are bad.
Exactly right. Exactly. And the other douchey thing that was said by Douchezilla, I won't give out his name. I don't agree with... I don't disagree with everything he says or that is said on TYT, the Young Turks, but, you know, they've changed. I don't like their approach. I don't like when they have a panel, everybody's head is nodding. They don't have anybody who disagrees. It's just one view. They act like they're journalists, but when you pay attention to the material that they're quoting, they're just repeating MSNBC and CNN. There's no journalistic inquiry or integrity whatsoever. I mean, this guy basically repeated what Jerry Falwell said after 9/11. After 9/11, Jerry Falwell blamed 9/11. He said it was, you know, the work of God punishing America for tolerating homosexuality and abortion, and that Americans brought this on themselves by allowing those things to happen. Christopher Hitchens then went on Hannity on a multitude of shows and talked after Falwell died and talked about how glad he was that that charlatan is dead, and he's the founder of Liberty University. I'm not crazy about the place at all. I don't know. I would really like to know what they teach in biology there. How old is the Earth? What is the distance in time between when the dinosaurs and the humans lived? I'm sure you'd have some really colorful answers from them. Having said that, I've heard of a lot of good people who went there. I like Candace Owens. That's her alma mater. And there's a lot of people who I disagree with and agree with. But that was Jerry Falwell. Fast forward to more recently, you know, this guy on TYT has a podcast, you know, similar to ours, I guess, except he has 500,000 followers.
Ours is way better.
Ours is way better. He has 500,000 followers on the count of the fact that he's associated. His uncle is the founder of the Young Turks. So, you know, don't get jealous too quick, folks. You have to understand the context of it. And he's definitely sort of a arrogant person who's never really had to work that hard for his position, doesn't understand a lot of things that many Americans and people all over the world have to struggle with, and he's not sympathetic towards those things.
So he's a snowflake.
Yeah, basically. He's not in university anymore. He reminds me of some of these dumb frat boys that I went to university with, except he's not of university age anymore. He's too old to have that behavior, so it's a little bit irritating. But he, you know, said, like Jerry Falwell, that I'm just going to say it, A lot of people are thinking it. It's not controversial, but, you know, America deserved to have 9/11 happen to them. You know, that's a pretty crazy thing. And I don't know if they're not talking about that more in the media because they don't want to condemn somebody who is in league with the sort of media status quo. Or is it because they don't want to give him publicity? Because on the other hand, I've noticed how a guy like Michael Savage, for example, who says crazy stuff every day, the people who call in on his show that agree with him, they're on their way home from work in the car and they're screaming, "You got me so angry." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm glad I got you angry. You know, you should be angry. This is what's going on in this country is terrible." He said things like autistic kids need to cut the crap out, cut the act out, and that they didn't have a dad who would smack them around enough. And he said things, crazy things about gay people. He was on MSNBC at one point, but then again, so was Pat Buchanan. And he said he had a gay caller. He was obviously Savage is against same-sex marriage, like bitterly. And a gay caller called in and he told him Michael Savage said, "You know, go away. I hope you get AIDS. Go to a bathhouse and get AIDS." And that was his last day on MSNBC. But he still says crazy shit like that. And, you know, you just got to listen to it sometimes for the craziness.
Yeah.
You don't want to contribute to his ratings, though, too much.
Yeah.
But, and the reason he's not talked about in the media is because nobody wants to give that radical guy the attention.
Yeah,
know?
I mean, they don't want to give him that attention, but I mean, as far as, you know, people coming out and saying that 9/11, that America deserved 9/11, well, yeah, but the thing is that 9/11, although it happened to America, it really didn't happen to America. It happened to about 3,000 or 4,000 families is what it happened to. It happened to firemen that were just, you know, sleeping at the firehouse and the alarm went off and they had a tragedy and then a building fell on them and killed them. It happened to, you know, office workers that were, you know, at work ready to start their day and then, you know, a big explosion and, you know, an hour later they're dead. You know, it happened to, you know, people whose families, you know, breathed in the air after the buildings collapsed and got terrible cancer and lung disease and emphysema and a myriad of other health problems that are still ongoing to this day. So it didn't happen to America. It happened to individual families and people. And the media and these pundits are really, really quick to like sensationalize and generalize something and move it to the point that it becomes such a external thing away from reality. But the reality is, so if you want to say that, you know, some New York City firefighter and his kids and his wife and his extended family deserved to die in the manner they did because of some U.S. foreign policy, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sorry. That's beyond deplorable thinking.
Yeah.
And people in the news business, celebrities and people that get put in front of a camera or microphone really need to think before they speak sometimes. They really do. But, you know, this is in America and you have the right to think and say such idiotic, bastardized, stupid things.
Well, I think what a contributing factor is, and TYT has often been accused of this, and I already said that what I don't like is it's like a panel of bobbleheads. They all agree it's an echo chamber. Anything that disagrees with them is responded to with hostility. The girl on that show, Anna Kasparian, who was just in, I think it was Forbes Under 30. So, you know, her motivation for being there is obviously financial gain. That's her incentive. It's not that she cares, and I don't think anybody is. I agree that whether you try, your idea of power is influencing people through an online news show, having a nationally syndicated news program, or being in politics. I agree, at the end of the day, power is not a means, it's an end. So that's why she's there. It's not for her, it's not to help the world. And, you know, who's to say that our motivations are noble if we were to be psychoanalyzed at the end of the day,
God,
right?
If I was psychoanalyzed, it might set off bells and whistles all around the globe.
We'll give you a neuropsych, Sean.
Yes.
But, you know, she was advocating a long time for against people who criticize or fat shame obese people who suffer with weight problems. And not an unreasonable thing. You have to be kind to people and understand that they're going through things. And that you don't understand. You don't know if somebody has problems with their liver or their pancreas or whatever it might be. I, you know, have one of my best friends suffers from really bad obesity, and I know her diet. It's not excessive. It has nothing to do with gluttony or anything like that. Having said that, there was a case several years ago. I think it might have even been 2016 during the Republican National Convention. People can look it up online when Alex Jones interrupted the YouTube panel for TYT. And it wasn't a nice thing for him to do that. He interrupted them, but it's Alex Jones. He's a huckster. He's a bit of a boor. And they're, at that time at least, they were considered to be rivals. Like Alex Jones was Fox News online, and TYT was MSNBC of the online world in terms of their status as counterparts on the internet. And he interrupted Cenk's talking, and anyway, it turned into a real, you know, brawl of words. Most of Cenk went crazy. His voice got all burly and deep, like he was trying to sound scary. That's not natural for him to sound like that. Alex Jones was keeping his cool because that's what he was there to do, was to get Cenk excited, and he succeeded, you know, in that. And then Anna, she, you know, yelled out after what she said about being nice to obese people. She's like, "Get off the stage, you fat fuck."
I know, right?
You know, and she loses her shit, like on her show. I thought, well, I don't agree with her all the time, but
She's a very angry woman.
she seems like a nice, you know, she means well until you see her on film when she is not wanting to be filmed and somebody has pushed her successfully, triggered her successfully the way Alex Jones did and does to people. That's his thing, not unlike Milo Yiannopoulos. You know, there's hypocrisy there.
So yeah, I mean, of course there's hypocrisy there. I mean, all those people get in their pulpit and preach what they think and what they want, but then it's like, doesn't apply to me though.
Yeah, but how could she not be careful? She knows that there's, you know,
Because she's
dozens or maybe hundreds of cameras. You know, people got their phones out. This is going online, and you have no impulse control. You're triggered that badly by your insecurities about your ideology that you end up contradicting yourself.
She's full of shit.
You know?
She's not contradicting herself. That's how she thinks in the first place. If she really, truly felt that, she would be more conscious, especially being a independent media personality. But, you know, they're also of a very elitist mindset within their own realm and groups and people that follow them because, you know, sadly, they can say anything they want. And people, you know, people that follow them won't get mad. I mean, that's why, you know, I mentioned way earlier in this show about the cannibalism thing. It's like they're all a bunch of cannibals. And they're all fine, but sooner or later, one's going to eat the other one. You know, but to somebody that's outside of their realm, they'll all band together to fight them, you know.
Yeah. So that was David Rubin, the guy. Remember we were talking about Stephen Fry going on the David Rubin show, on somebody's show? And I was like, fuck, what's his name, man? I love the guy's show. It's David Rubin. He used to work with the Young Turks.
Right.
And he has a tremendous lot of interesting things to say about his experience there, how the show changed. Because that's actually one of the first political shows I ever watched. I loved Cenk. When I was a teenager, you know.
When I first started watching it, I used to like him too until I realized he was full of shit.
Well, I don't know if it was, for me, I wouldn't, personally, I can't speak for you, but I wouldn't use the term realize that he was full of shit. He became full of shit once his budget and his show took off and more money was at stake. And then he had these views concreted in. So he started out, it was basically him in a corner, very low budget, very humble program. There wasn't even a panel. He didn't have money to pay anybody. It was just him talking, and he can be funny, you know, with the whole "of course" thing.
Yeah, he can be.
He can be funny, and there's times when I agree with him, and I'm like, man, Jank, only you could have articulated it like that.
Yeah.
Then what started to happen, I noticed that his set started to look better and better. You know, it started, he had like a panel, he had guests, and everybody looked kind of prettier than, you know, they would on a lower budget production. They had, you know, great lighting, background graphics. You know, somebody was investing in this.
Yeah.
And all this investment, a lot of this investment comes from Qatar, by the way, because, you know, Jank is a ex-Muslim, an apostate from that faith. His parents are still Muslim. Probably very nice people, liberal, secular Muslims like I like to think he is. But he's not a liberal anymore. He's more of a leftist. And his rhetoric changed because I used to live in Brussels for 2 years, actually. And, you know, it was interesting to me to see you know, how many Moroccans and Muslim people were there. It doesn't bother me that they're there, but there were. What did bother me was when I would see demonstrations of people who are, like, they're fundamentalist and they want to impose the ways of their country on Belgium. And that is what I was opposed to. You know, and there was an area there called Molenbeek, which everybody knew was a, quote, no-go zone. I mean, there's no barbed wire or anything, but it's understood as a no-go zone because if you go there as a non-Moroccan or non-Muslim, non-native or member of that community, you have to follow certain rules and understand that you are not welcome there. So there were situations where scantily dressed girls who were at the club late at night and they wanted to go home, they went into that neighborhood and they got beaten or worse, maybe even raped. And there were cases of people, and the police won't go there. And then the government will even say things like, well, it's, you know, it was your stupid idea to go there. You shouldn't have been dressed provocatively. This is the Belgian government. Similar in Sweden, where, and Milo Yiannopoulos said he was going to go through with this, but I'm not sure if he did. But Sweden, which had this massive annual gay pride festival, was recommended to change its path, you know, the direction, the streets that it goes through. It's been doing that for decades. But now, because this mass Islamic immigration, there's certain areas where the government was saying, no, we have to change it now. We don't want to bother those people, even though that's, to me, one of the main things about Sweden, you know, is their acceptance and tolerance, the good example they send in the way they treat homosexual LGBT people, all right? So there's a lot going on there that TYT was denying. When I heard Jank say that there was no such thing as a no-go zone, when I lived there and I'd been there and I've interacted with people who suffered the consequences of being there when they shouldn't have been, that's when the table started to turn. That's when I was like, this guy has an agenda. He's changing. He's not... You know, he's not the common sense, jolly, you know, bullshit caller that he was when he started. The other thing was when they started condemning Ayaan Hirsi Ali, you know, the author of Infidel. She's a Somalian woman who escaped an arranged marriage. She was supposed to go to Toronto, Canada, which is even scarier. That was when this arranged marriage was meant to be consummated. Instead of going to Toronto, she went to Holland, to the Netherlands. And she became educated, and in the book Infidel, she describes what her experience was like in her youth, the brainwashing, the control. I don't think she has any semblance of a clitoris left because of the FGM, or female genital mutilation, she endured and many other women do. And she went to the Netherlands, became educated, gradually shook off her post-traumatic stress disorder, and began educating other Muslim women on the fact that, who lived there, on the opportunities that they had, and they didn't have to be worried about, you know, dishonoring their husbands or their families anymore, because you don't live in that environment anymore. You know, there's a reason people go to more economically developed countries that don't have those kind of primitive medieval traditions. And yeah, Cenk called her a neoconservative, you know, and that she's part of the problem. She had her clitoris cut off, and you're not even gonna, even if you disagree with her, you got to handle that situation with kid gloves the way you would if a person who is a pro gun guy who disagrees with a parent who lost their kid in a school shooting. You can disagree with them, but you have to handle it in a certain way, I think, that is sympathetic, especially when you're in the public eye. But you can still say your point. I'm again, freedom of speech, but the guy showed no sympathy for her experience, and I didn't like that.
Well, I mean, that's when, you know, when somebody is a quote-unquote journalist or presents them to be that way, and then they start developing a bias that, you know, it doesn't matter what the bias is, you know, or what side it comes from. I mean, it hurts their credibility. And once you give your credibility away, then you're going to have people that look at you two different ways. You're going to have your disciples under you that no matter what you say, they're going to follow you because they like what you're saying and they want it to be true, whether it is or not. And then you're going to have the other people that see through your crap and put you in a certain category, more so of entertainment than news, and, you know, they're going to see you for what you are.
Right.
And you know, unfortunately, like I said, I used to watch his program, but when I started seeing stories like that and started hearing him, you know, talk about things in a very, very unmasked, you know, bias, then I was like, you know, he's not legitimate to me anymore, and I can't waste an hour of my time watching somebody that I don't feel is legitimate. So,
right,
you know,
right. And I think what topped it all off for me, and I think for a lot of other people, was, and if you look it up, his interview with Sam Harris. And I think it's a 3-hour unedited interview where Sam Harris is, as like always, making perfect sense when it comes to the subject of Islam and how it's not only terrorism, but all over the world there are people who hold illiberal beliefs within that faith. A lot of people talk about an Islamic Reformation, and there's people like Mehdi Hassan in the United Kingdom. He works for Al Jazeera, and he is very anti-Reformation when it comes to the subject of Islam. Then there's many Muslims who are great like that. Majid Nawaz, for example, the head of the Killiam Foundation, actually he co-founded that with Sam Harris, and they talk about issues like, well, you know, there's gay Muslims too, and we need to worry about them. So we need to talk about that now that we're entering a globalized society where it's not just their problems and our problems. We all are starting to share problems in different ways because of the way the world is changing. And borders are, well, whether Trump likes it or not, because of the way corporations are outsourcing in other countries, we're getting closer and closer, and borders, the significance is beginning to disintegrate. So that's why we talk about these kind of things, even though they don't impact us personally on a daily level. They might eventually, and that's what we have to watch out for. And he had Cenk, his papers were everywhere, fumbling around, having a really difficult time, and instead of just conceding, saying, hey, you've got a point, it was, you know, doubling down, getting more aggressive, and it was, you know...
He embarrassed himself.
He embarrassed himself, and I kudos to Sam Harris for his patience and his ability to keep a straight face throughout that whole thing and not start making fun of him or humiliating him because of the advantage he had, obviously, in that disagreement. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit weird to hear people on the left talking idealistically about a recession just to get the guy they liked out of office. And remember, a lot of these people are above the effects of recession. So,
definitely.
Anyway, John, last topic. You wanted to talk about Nicole Arbour. She had a great video you were mentioning. She had something to say about motivational speakers. What was that?
God, you know, I wish I could remember the guy's name. I don't remember the guy's name, but you guys listening can look it up. I mean, Nicole Arbour, she's very funny, and I'm sure, You know, if you're on Facebook or Instagram, you've probably seen her videos. She kind of came to fame for a fat-shaming video, or got accused of making a fat-shaming video, where she basically made a comic spliced-up video of 4 or 5 minutes where basically it was saying, you know, fat people need to take responsibility for being fat and this and that, and it's not a healthy way to live, and you shouldn't encourage, you shouldn't just blindly, accept, somebody like this because you're encouraging them to be unhealthy, something along those lines. So she came to prominence for a video like that, and she's got a huge audience now. She's very popular. She's going off in all kinds of directions. I think she's getting some type of TV show. She's writing a book, does seminars now, but anyway, she just called out a motivational speaker, and again, I can't remember what the guy's name is, but she called him out because he's made a name for himself being this internet motivational guy. He's got write-ups in, I believe, Forbes magazine. He's been on TV a bunch of times, and he sells very expensive, like, motivational products and things. And it turns out that he's been stealing stuff from everybody else. So all the personal quotes he makes, he's taken from somebody. So she made a video calling him out on his BS because he's also stole some things she said. Mm-hmm. And she took a video and she went pretty detailed where she would show him saying a motivational quote, mm-hmm. and then she would show you on the side what book or what person said it before, and the guy literally says it word for word. Right. So it was just calling this guy out for that, and it was just kind of like refreshing to see somebody being called out on their bullshit. So if you want to see it, just go to the internet and search Nicole Arbor, and then it's probably right up on their feed. So it was just very interesting. Right.
Well, it reminds me a lot of, and we talked about him before, because there was, I don't know where I stand on Russell Brand. I like the guy. I'm sure if I'm on a personal level, he's awesome. I've liked him since I was a teenager because I lived in Europe. I knew about him way before anybody here knew about him, unless they were in Europe and England and found out about him. He's got a history of addiction that he talks openly about, and he's got his book out, Recovery, Freedom from Our Addictions. And, it's nice that he wrote that book to help people, and I know that was his intention, but a lot of people are talking about how it's essentially a paraphrase of Bill W.'s Alcoholics Anonymous, the AA, I think they call it the Big Book. And the whole point of that is it's anonymous. It's a nonprofit organization. Mm-hmm. It's helping addicts with the not with almost altruistic intention. Now, I've heard a lot about how AA is outdated in terms of helping people recover because of its religious element. They try to change. They switch the word from the word God to the term higher power. And, I think that if you really pushed it, it's the same thing as God at the end of the day. I've heard people who got off alcohol and who are atheists, and they said, oh, my higher power is a tree. And I'm like, okay, I don't know how long you're going to be able to stay off the booze if a tree is your motivation for not drinking. But, I don't want to judge people or dampen people's enthusiasm for recovery. But, to make profit off of a book like that, it's a lot like the recovery industry itself, how expensive it is, and the low rate at which it's shown to be successful when they apply all that. It's all a racket, and I don't like to see people profiting when they claim to be helping people, and this is a life-threatening issue. I mean, especially now with the opioid epidemic, rather, which has taken a lot of lives.
It was P.T. Barnum that coined the phrase, there's a sucker born every minute. And
you're going to take them for all they got.
Take them for all they got. If there's it's a capitalist society. Caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. The only reason you can be snowballed or ripped off by somebody is if you're ignorant and uneducated to the bullshit they're spewing at you. So the way you combat people like that is you stay informed about things, and you don't believe in phantoms or magical cures or overnight get-rich-quick schemes, because there's no such thing as any of that. So, you know, these people are very, very crafty. It's one of the oldest tricks or scams, you know, in history, is to promise some amazing thing and pander to people's, like, desires and dreams, and give them, you know, what sounds like a too good to be true scenario. And, you know, as many, probably thousands of years as that's been going on, it still hooks just as many fish.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, on the hooking of fishes, let's call it a day today, John.
Yes.
It's great talking to you.
As always, great talking to you, too.
Yeah, you know, things have been accelerating at a really crazy rate politically.
Yeah, they have.
You know, keep your noses plugged, folks. And next week, we'll see you back here on The Big Flush.
Yeah, if you got crap in your life or going around, just flush it all away. That's what you're supposed to do. So we'll see you guys later.